The convoy didn't arrive with fanfare. It arrived like judgment. Silent, black SUVs gliding through the muddy street, where rusted zinc roofs bowed under the weight of forgotten years. Neighbors peeked through torn curtains and broken windows, stunned by the sudden appearance of tinted vehicles in a place where even commercial bikes feared to enter. The smell of fuel mixed with damp earth as car doors opened, polished shoes stepped into red mud, and a woman in an all-white power suit emerged, eyes scanning the street like she was searching for something buried beneath its poverty. Just 3. Days before, the man she came to find had given her his only meal. Not words, not a sermon, just food. Cold, nylon-wrapped rice and beans handed over without asking her name, without knowing her shame, without needing anything in return. He hadn't known she was a billionaire's daughter. The day they met, she had looked nothing like wealth. Her makeup had melted in the heat. Her shoes had broken at the heel, and her mind was spiraling from betrayal, scandal, and humiliation. She had left her office building a powerful executive, and an hour later, she was crying beside a lamppost on Allen Avenue like a ghost with no name. Her family name was trending for all the wrong reasons. Her fiancé had vanished with stolen funds, and her father had publicly disowned her. In that single hour, she had become homeless in spirit, even if she still had an address on Banana Island, and then came the man. Dirty, shirt torn at the shoulder, skin hardened by the Lagos sun. He didn't speak. He didn't stare. He just dropped the food beside her and walked away. She remembered how he had sat back like it didn't matter whether she touched it or not, but hunger doesn't argue with pride. She had eaten that food, slowly, wiping tears with oily fingers, tasting not just the rice and beans, but something deeper. Dignity. That food had anchored her enough to survive the night. And the next day, something had shifted. She hadn't slept. Instead, she called in a quiet favor. Not one of those dramatic billionaire moves. Just a trace. CCTV footage, a few eyewitness accounts, and a bit of digging. Within 48 hours, she had a name. Ifeanyi. No surname. No phone number. No bank account. Just Ifeanyi, a homeless man who slept beside a vulcanizer's stand near Allen Junction. Now she stood in the mud, beside his spot, but he wasn't there. The crowd gathered quickly. Children barefoot, women in wrappers, men with folded arms. Whispers flew. Who was she? What did she want from Ifeanyi? The street didn't trust wealth. They had seen rich men come and destroy more than they built, but she wasn't here to take. She was here to return. That same morning, Ifeanyi was pushing a hired wheelbarrow through a shoddy, his belly empty, but his shoulders square. The past few days had been strange. First, a little girl gave him a sachet of water without being asked. Then a cleaner at the bank let him rest beside the generator room without chasing him away. That morning, the food vendor had offered him a leftover akara, unprovoked. Small things, but they felt like signs. As though something unseen was shifting in his favor. When he returned to Allen, he saw the crowd before he saw the cars. He thought someone had died or a celebrity had arrived. But then he saw her, the same woman, but different. Her posture upright, her clothes spotless, her face no longer broken, and she was asking for him. He almost turned and ran, but his feet froze. She turned at that moment and saw him, not with pity, but with respect. Before he could move, her aides stepped back and she walked towards him, slowly, steadily, as if the world needed to watch this moment. She reached into her bag and pulled out a set of papers, documents, neatly bound. Then she pointed behind her to one of the SUVs. Inside was a key. Inside was a folder. The key opened a newly rented one-room apartment in Surulere, paid for a year in advance. The folder contained documents of employment, a cleaner's position at her father's company, with room to grow. She hadn't begged her father for approval. She had demanded it. The crowd erupted in shouts. Some clapped, others cried. But Ifeanyi didn't move for a long time. He stood there, heart pounding, unsure if this was reality or just another cruel joke from the gods, but it wasn't. This was gratitude, clean, undeniable. 3 days ago he had given away his last meal without expecting anything. No one saw it, No camera recorded it. No angel descended with trumpet. But heaven had noticed. And now, a convoy had returned not for show, not for charity, but to deliver balance. That night, as he sat on a real bed in his own room for the first time in years, staring at a bulb that stayed on, drinking water from a clean cup, Ifeanyi didn't cry. He simply sat still, thinking about how one small act, in a moment of selfless instinct, had opened a door that begging never could, because sometimes the only seed you need to sow is kindness, even when your hands are empty. The mattress smelled of new nylon, the kind that came straight from market stalls in Lagos Island. Ifeanyi lay flat, staring at the ceiling, unsure whether to sleep or keep watching the electric fan spinning slowly above him. The sound of traffic. Outside was distant, muffled. The room was small, but to him, it felt like a mansion. 4 walls, no leaks, no rats, no stench of drain water creeping in through the floor. Just clean space, a bed, and the hum of stability. He hadn't even unpacked. His old backpack sat on the corner table, the same one he had carried through gutters and rain, full of memories soaked in hardship. It still held the worn-out Bible, a broken spoon, and a faded picture of his mother he had never shown anyone. For years he had lived in survival mode: eat, move, hide, work, sleep, repeat. There was no room for dreaming. But tonight, something different had planted itself inside him. Possibility. He still didn't know her name. The woman in white, the one who had returned in a convoy, hadn't uttered a word to him in front of the crowd. She had simply handed him the key and walked back to her car. The message was clear. This wasn't about showing off. It wasn't pity. It wasn't charity. It was recognition. A thank you returned in full measure. The next morning, he woke up before sunrise. He hadn't used an alarm in years. Hunger had always done the job. But this morning, his stomach wasn't growling. Instead, there was nervousness. The folder on the table contained his employment letter. He had been assigned a cleaner's position at a large corporate building in Ikoyi. Transport had been arranged for his first week. There was even a small allowance deposited in a bank account that had been opened for him. The kind of details that didn't seem real, but were. Ifeanyi bathed, dressed in second-hand trousers, and a clean shirt folded on the bed when he arrived, possibly arranged by her team. He left his slippers by the door and stepped into black shoes that didn't belong to his past life. They didn't fit perfectly, but they felt right. At the gate, a small car waited, driver ready. The kind of life he once watched from the roadside, now happening to him. The company was tall, glass walls, marble floors, and the kind of lighting that made poor people feel naked. He entered slowly, head down, hands behind his back. His ID was waiting, his name printed clearly. Not just Ifeanyi, the street man, but Ifeanyi Okoye, the full name no one had asked for in years. He didn't know who had traced it. Perhaps her team. Perhaps God. The cleaning supervisor assigned him to the lobby floors. Polished tiles stretched like mirrors beneath his feet. As he wiped and swept, many passed without noticing him. But he noticed everything: the smell of expensive perfumes, the way high heels clicked confidently, the laughter from people who didn't worry about dinner. Yet he wasn't bitter. He was grateful. Every tile he cleaned felt like a prayer answered. After 3 days, he started memorizing the schedules. Who came in late, who left early, which security guard snuck naps, which staff threw used coffee cups behind planters. He didn't speak unless spoken to, but he watched. He studied. Not because he was planning anything, but because suffering had trained him to observe quietly. One day, as he wiped the elevator glass, the same woman in white passed by again. She didn't look at him directly, but she paused ever so briefly. A soft nod, almost unnoticeable. But he saw it. And it was enough. He knew now she worked here, possibly owned part of it, maybe not just a daughter of wealth, but a woman who had rebuilt her status after falling. He never asked why she had helped him. He didn't need the explanation. In his spirit, he knew. Sometimes God tests both the giver and the receiver at the same time. One to see if he can sacrifice, the other to see if she can remember. Weeks passed. He kept working, quietly, diligently. He never missed a day, never arrived late. Every evening, he returned to his small room in Surulere, removed his shoes, washed his clothes, and prepared for the next day. His life had fallen into rhythm, but unlike the rhythm of the streets, this one had structure, purpose. Then came the letter, sealed, hand-delivered to his apartment. He opened it with trembling fingers. It wasn't just an appreciation note. It was an invitation. A new program was being launched by the same company, a reintegration scheme for formerly homeless citizens, aimed at giving them skills and structured work. She had chosen him to be a coordinator. His first reaction was disbelief, then fear, then silence. But deep inside, he felt something rise, not pride, not joy, but readiness. The woman had returned in a convoy, yes. But her convoy wasn't just about cars. It was about opportunity. And now she was offering him the chance to become a vehicle for others. That night, he didn't sleep. He sat on the edge of his bed, writing down names in a notebook. Names of people still on the street. People who had shared food with him. People who once gave him a dry space under their kiosk roof. He remembered them all, because Ifeanyi understood what many people with wealth would never learn. Sometimes, you don't need to be rescued. You just need to be remembered. Rain returned to Lagos like a memory, heavy, insistent, washing the grime from forgotten corners and pushing hawkers deeper into makeshift shelters. For most, it was just another downpour. For Ifeanyi, it was a reminder of the nights he had curled under cardboard, listening to the sky mourn with him. But now, the sound of the rain hit the windows of a training room, air-conditioned, clean, with rows of metal chairs neatly arranged. The program had launched 2 weeks earlier. Ifeanyi had been made coordinator not because of certificates. He had none. But because his life had already been the curriculum. He knew the streets, not from movies or volunteer drives, but from living inside them. Every morning he stood at the front of the class, not as a lecturer, but as a bridge. The attendees were just like he once was. Former Okada riders, bus conductors, women who had lost market stalls to fire, youths who had escaped cult groups, and mothers abandoned, with children by roadside husbands. He didn't teach with grammar, he used memory. He told them how to wake up even when sleep wasn't sweet, how to survive on chin-chin and water, how to stay sane when the world called you invisible. He taught them what it meant to carry dignity even when you had nothing but a torn shirt. And faith. He didn't promise miracles. He only promised structure. Each day, more joined the program. Word spread fast, not because of flyers or billboards, but because of testimony. Ifeanyi's face became the symbol, not of pity, but of restoration. The woman in white, still unnamed to many, stayed in the background. She didn't pose for pictures. She didn't make speeches. But she signed the papers that made the, project grow. And in every decision, she made sure Ifeanyi's voice mattered. One afternoon, as the training ended, Ifeanyi walked alone down a back road near Mushin. His eyes scanned the gutters, the abandoned shops, the small groups huddled around gambling tables. Not in judgment, in remembrance. He knew those corners. He had bled in some of them. And now, he returned not as a ghost of the past, but as a whisper of change. That evening, he stopped at his old sleeping spot. The same broken wall beside the vulcanizer's shed. The same stone he used to rest his head. He sat for a while, watching the street unfold. No one recognized him. He was cleaner now, dressed in modest office wear, but his spirit remained tethered to this soil. One of the boys sleeping near the gutter groaned and shifted, a face covered in dirt, mouth dry from thirst. Ifeanyi stood and left quietly. He returned with bread and sachet water from a nearby kiosk. He placed it beside the boy without saying a word, then walked away, just like he had done months ago for the crying stranger. By the time he reached his room, there was a message on his phone, a new number, short and formal. It was an invitation to a board meeting. The company, impressed by the program's early success, wanted him to represent the reintegration unit. It wasn't just a formality. They wanted his input on strategy, real input, his thoughts, his ideas. He froze. The boardroom. That sacred hall where powerful people whispered big decisions over filtered coffee and glass tables. He had no suit, no tie, just his shoes, his story, and the hunger to see more people rise. When the day came, he entered the room slowly. The air smelled like expensive polish and confidence. Executives stared as he took his seat. Some faces carried surprise, others curiosity. But the woman in white sat at the end of the table, arms folded, expression calm. She didn't need to say anything. Her presence alone was a shield. They listened as Ifeanyi spoke, not with elegance, but with clarity. He described the flaws in the outreach model. He suggested local mentors in each zone. He outlined what wouldn't work based on lived experience, not textbooks. And when he was done, the room fell quiet, not in mockery, but in respect. That evening, the decision was unanimous. The pilot would expand. More trainers would be recruited. Ifeanyi would lead them. He returned home not with pride, but with quiet gratitude. The same blanket he once used on concrete now covered his bed. The same hands that once picked scraps now carried files of strategy. But he never forgot. He never changed his route to work. He never stopped returning to the streets on weekends, not to show off, not to preach, just to see, to listen, to remember. Because in every hungry child he met, in every man digging through refuse, he saw himself. Not the version on flyers, the real version, the one that had no food, no future, but still found the strength to give. And he knew the story hadn't ended. It was just beginning. The sun rose slowly over Lagos, painting the skyline with muted gold. Street vendors lit their stoves, bus horns echoed like morning bells. Children in faded uniforms marched off to school, and in a quiet corner of Surulere, a man ironed his shirt carefully, the way his mother once taught him before job interviews. Ifeanyi was preparing for a different kind of day. Today was not about cleaning floors or teaching new recruits. Today was ceremony, official launch. The reintegration program he once coordinated in silence was now receiving full backing. Government agencies, NGOs, corporate partners. But beneath all the headlines, he remained grounded. The event was hosted in a community center not far from where he once slept. A deliberate decision, not some distant hotel on the island, but on the same mainland that raised, broke, and remade him. The chairs were white plastic, the microphones slightly rusty, the fan humming too loudly, but the hall was full. Not just with officials, but with faces from the streets. Real people, the forgotten ones. He arrived early, walking in on his own. No convoy, no entourage, just himself, a leather folder tucked under his arm. He greeted everyone, the cleaners, the security guards, even the woman adjusting the plastic table covers. He wasn't trying to impress anyone. It was simply his. Way at the center of the front row, she sat, the woman in white. But today, she wore Ankara, low-key, regal. She didn't try to own the moment. She just watched him. From the first day he had offered her that cold rice and beans to this very hour, she had never said thank you with words. She never needed to. Her actions had been enough. The event began with speeches. Big men took the microphone and threw words around like currency, impact, innovation, empowerment. But the crowd waited for one voice. And when Ifeanyi stepped forward, silence fell like evening rain. He didn't speak about himself. He spoke about the boy sleeping beside the gutter in front of the old plaza in Yaba. The woman in Agege who bathes her child with sachet water every morning. The teenager who hawks gala in traffic because his WAEC fees vanished into a betting shop. He told the truth, raw, unpolished, and the hall responded, not with applause, but with stillness. The kind that only truth can create. When he finished, the officials rose to shake his hand. Cameras clicked. Journalists scribbled. But Ifeanyi quietly stepped down from the podium and moved to the back of the hall. He didn't enjoy the spotlight. He had lived too long in the shadows to crave light. Later that evening, after the guests left, he returned to his old street. Not out of nostalgia, but out of duty. He found the vulcanizer, now an old man with gray patches in his beard. He handed him a folded envelope, rent for the space he used to sleep on years ago, a symbolic payment. The old man refused at first, then accepted with trembling hands. Then Ifeanyi walked to the spot by the lamppost. It was still there, slightly overgrown, slightly bent, but unchanged. He stood in front of it, eyes closed, heart steady. That was where everything had started, where she had cried, and he had given. Not money, not advice, just food. He had no idea then that kindness was a currency. He sat on the pavement, now clean from rain. It was getting dark. The sounds of Lagos drifted in, the distant call of suya sellers, generators humming, lovers arguing softly nearby. He sat in peace, not just because his life had changed, but because he had changed others. Then the quiet hum of tires on gravel broke the silence. A single black SUV pulled up beside the road. Not a convoy, just one car. And she stepped out. This time without aids, without fanfare. She walked to the lamppost and stood beside him. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The silence was louder than words, filled with memory, pain, grace, and redemption. She reached into her handbag and pulled out a small brown envelope. She placed it beside him gently and turned to leave. After she entered the SUV and drove off, he opened it. Inside was a photograph, faded, worn at the edges. It was him. That very night. The rain. The meal. Him placing the nylon pack beside her. Someone had taken the photo, maybe from a shop window, maybe by accident. On the back she had written, "Just 5 words. This saved my life too." He folded it carefully and placed it in his pocket. As the streetlights flickered above him, Ifeanyi stood and walked home. Not to the street, not to shelter, to home, real home, carried not by cars, but by character, because in the end it wasn't about food. It wasn't about riches. It was about how one ordinary act, unseen, unpaid, unpraised, could ripple through the world and return, not as charity, but as destiny fulfilled. And that is how the man with nothing gave everything, and got it all back. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me bring more heartfelt stories to life, one soul at a time. Please subscribe the Folkteller Bae